It's just another bad day, dark feelings are back, assaulting your heart with a panic attack. There ain't no shame in feeling depressed.
Hello, this is John Richardson and you're listening to the Andy's Man Club podcast.
Okay, hello and welcome to episode 4 of the Andy's Man Club podcast. We're here with myself and Neil again this morning. Neil, who joined us a few weeks ago on one of our podcasts. And we have another special guest with us this morning, a gentleman called Bryn Law. Good morning, Bryn.
Good morning. Hi, okay?
Very well, yourself?
Not too bad, thanks, in the circumstances.
Yeah, definitely. I think we'll come on to talk about those circumstances shortly and how we're sort of all dealing with that. Obviously, myself and Neil are quite aware of what it is that you do and how you've, lived your life, I suppose, in career-wise. But for those people that maybe aren't aware of who you are and what you do, if you just wouldn't mind giving us a little bit of an introduction into you.
Yeah, no problem. I'll try and keep it short. But I've been doing the broadcast. I've been a football reporter, effectively, for want of a better phrase. I've been a football reporter for nearly 30 years. I mean, I've been a journalist, if you like, for 30 years, but I've been a broadcaster in various other areas. But primarily, I've been covering football, and that would be what most people would probably recognise me for. In particular, I worked on a Sky Sports show called Soccer Saturday, which is a very popular Sky Sports show. And I was on that for a lot of years as one of the reporters reporting live on games. So the thing that Chris Kamara does, the unbelievable Jeff, I was part of that team. And that's probably where the greatest level of recognition comes from. But so I did the BBC first in Leeds, so that I have a West Yorkshire connection. That's where I first started really covering football, Leeds United. There you go, Andrew, that's for you. And I worked for a number of years up and down the country covering Leeds United. Then I got the move to Sky, started working on Sky Sports News when it was a brand new thing. Nobody knew what it was or where it was even. So I was in that from the very, very beginning. I left Sky last April and I've been working as a freelance broadcaster since then. And primarily been working with Leeds United TV, covering all the Leeds United matches again. So my career has come full circle.
Brilliant. Well, thanks for that, Bryn. Obviously, you've spent a lot of time as well covering the Wales national team, haven't you?
That's true. That's one of the things I enjoyed most in 20 plus years I did at Sky. Because I was a Wales fan anyway, having grown up in North Wales in Wrexham. So to get the opportunity to cover the national side, when I used to go as a fan, travel abroad as well to watch Wales, to get the opportunity to do that was absolutely brilliant. And it culminated for me very much I was out in Bosnia the night that Wales finally qualified, after waiting since 1958, finally qualified for a major summer tournament. And I was there on the pitch at the moment it happened. And of all the things that happened to me in my career, and there have been lots of great moments, that's probably the top moment, I would suggest.
Fantastic. Well, this will be getting shared in Wales as well. We have a club in South Wales that meets a rugby club every Monday night. Obviously not in the current circumstances, as we'll come on to in a moment. But yeah, we do have a presence in Wales as well. So the podcast will be getting shared around that area as well. So obviously, just coming on to the sort of circumstances. Obviously, you've talked about being a broadcaster and a freelancer and one thing and another. How are you with the circumstances we find ourselves in at this moment in time with lockdown and one thing and another?
Well, it's very interesting times, isn't it? And you guys, in a sense, ought to be very busy because I've got no work to do. You know, I've worked for 30 years, left Sky last April, which was a bit of a jolt to the system in itself. So I've spent the last 12 months trying to kind of create a freelance portfolio. February had been my best month. I'd done the most work thus far. And then on the Friday where football was suspended, that's when everything stopped because all my work revolves around football. So the commentaries at Leeds United, I do media training with the FA of Wales on their A and Pro license coaching courses. I had conferences that I'd been booked to host football coaching conferences. So immediately at that point, everything went. And I'm in a circumstance that I'm 1 year into the freelance role. So now, currently, I can't get any support. So as I sit here currently, I have no income. And that's the sort of thing that was being replicated, I would imagine, up and down the country at the moment for people. And the first thing I think about, when I woke up this morning, I thought about the mortgage. And for the last 3/4 of an hour before we're talking, I've been on the phone trying to get through to the mortgage people. They're not answering. So these are the sorts of things that people are now thinking about all of a sudden, where lives have been completely turned upside down. And when you're the person who's the breadwinner, when your responsibility is to make sure that there's a roof kept over the head of the family and all the rest of it, and I've got a daughter at university and another one in still in school doing A-levels, you've got that level of responsibility, and you never anticipate being in this situation whereby you've no real plan or idea how this is going to play out. So it's dealing with that, isn't it? And that's where I think you guys hopefully are going to kind of, be able to offer a level of support.
Even though you're obviously freelance now and working for yourself, do you have any kind of contact with the outside world at all, offering you any kind of support, or you're literally out there on your own?
No, currently pretty much on my own. I mean, I've got pals, obviously, and that aspect of things. But no, I would effectively say I'm on my own, if you like. I mean, I say zero work, but Leeds United have come in with a couple of little things that, but it's difficult for everybody because football has closed down. So the industry of football currently is basically has just stopped. Overnight it stopped. So there are a lot of people who work. Well, it's nothing that I would ever have anticipated. I did the Huddersfield game at Ellen Road. Sorry to remind you of it, Neil.
It's all right. It's all right. For Andy's Man Club, it was a great day. For Huddersfield Town, it was an awful day.
Well, it was a full house at Ellen Road. Great atmosphere. Really good performance from Leeds United. At the end of the match, there's a big roar to celebrate the victory for Leeds fans anyway. And then the scoreboard throws up the scores from the other games around the country, and it transpires that Leeds have not only won the game, but they've gone back to the top of the table, and the gap at the top is now 7 points. Now,
enjoying it, Neil?
Go on, sorry, Andrew.
Are you enjoying that bit, Neil? Are you enjoying listening to that?
Sorry, I muted Bryn about 3 minutes ago.
Just take your headphones off for a bit.
It's fine. I'm used to it. I've given plenty out in the past.
There is a point to the anecdote. I'm not just winding you up, promise. But we got, so the crowd roars because Leeds are top of the table, 7 points clear at the top, 9 games to go. And then all of a sudden, within 4 or 5 days, when you've been anticipating, a sort of triumphant march towards the Premier League, and as a professional broadcaster, someone with an interest in Leeds United, I'm looking forward to that potential process. I'm looking on it as being another, like that night in Bosnia, that when you're on the pitch, it's good to be part of something positive. So your mind is set towards that and focused on that positive thing, really positive thing. The city of Leeds needs a Premier League football club, all this stuff. And then within a few days, it's all gone. And nobody has a clue when or even if it comes back. And that puts a whole load of people in a similar position of just being, your life, football is a daft game, let's be honest about it, but it's a daft game that lots of people like. And not only is it a daft game lots of people like, but it's also a daft game that's become quite a big industry. It employs a lot of people. And I'm reading stories now. Fifth Pro have been saying that they're very worried about the level of depression that players are beginning to report. The PFA have had a highly raised number of calls from players who are beginning to exhibit signs potentially of depression, because you've got all these people whose sole focus has been this one thing, and it's stopped and nobody knows when it's coming back. And there are many other aspects of our lives now that are the same: theatre, music, even to an extent television, because things aren't being made and people can't gather, and restaurants and pubs and all the rest of it. So we're all in this situation of having no idea where our lives are heading.
See, with footballers, a lot of it this is literally all they've known since they were boys, and they've obviously living the dream that many of us sort of living our dreams for us, aren't they? When we go and watch them, you tap into that, don't you?
Absolutely.
I mean, going on to the football thing, obviously we're all big football fans. How do you see this season playing out? Do you see it finishing? Do you see it getting void? I mean, for me, it's got to finish. Whenever that is, it's got to finish.
Well, I'm fully in agreement with you. I mean, I'm biased. Let's get I'll put my cards on the table here, and I'll put Andrew's cards on the table for him as well. This season needs to finish because Leeds United need to get promoted. Okay.
Completely.
So
as a sense of fairness for me, regardless of who's top or who's bottom, with 8-9 games left, that if you've gone this far, it's got to finish. It's the only fair and right way to finish to do it.
I fully agree with that, Neil. Well said. But there are other aspects to this that people need to consider. We talked about the industry aspect to it, football being an industry. Well, you've got a raft of players, professional footballers up and down the country, whose contracts are based on a season being completed. So bonus payments, appearance payments. I mean, the Leeds lads will be very well rewarded if the club gets promoted to the Premier League. Yeah. So if you were to say to them, the season, that's it, it's over, they're not going to get access to that. That's just one aspect of what, voiding, if that's the phrase, would bring about. And the next aspect to that would be that those individuals potentially, plus their clubs, would then say, well, hold on a second, you can't void it. Like you just said, Neil, we're so close to the end, we're 9 games away. How can you say this thing didn't happen? Now, in the great scheme of things, this is all irrelevant. I understand that, and people will say, I get that.
Got to talk about it, don't we?
But you have to talk about it, because at some point after all of this, and there has to be an after all of this, these things will resume. So you've got to find a way, or at least you've got to allow yourself to think about a way to plan for that moment. So you do need to come up with an idea. And the other problem with all of this is that the longer things go on, the greater the likelihood is that it's going to have an absolutely seismic impact on not just professional football, but all professional sports in this country and every country, rugby league, rugby union, the lot. Because if you can't gather people together to watch the thing, there's no point in the thing. This applies to theatre, applies to concerts, everything. So the whole lot is right in the middle at the moment of almost a perfect storm. And the financial implications of that will be severe and could be seen very soon. But one way at least of getting some money back into clubs for the time being is that every club now has the facility to show its own matches in the Football League, to show its own matches in Premier League, obviously. So they could broadcast matches, and they could they could ask people to pay for watching those games. And that at least would create a bit of a revenue stream that might tide people over until such time as we have something like a green light to go back to something like what we had before.
I think the biggest thing that's... Sorry, go on a bit.
Football as well, I think, coming around, obviously you've mentioned there that the sort of mental state of some of the players and things like that. A few years ago, I think that would have been a massive concern, but I think a lot of those stigmas within those sort of arenas are being challenged. I mean, you touched there on, obviously, the Leeds and Huddersfield Town game, a game where both sets of players warmed up in our T-shirts. That was huge for us. And, I think that's a real positive thing from the game. Like you say, you touched on, the work that you've done in keeping in touch with the players and things like that. So, if there's any sort of positive to be brought out of it, my hope would be that those players are well looked after and they're given the opportunity through sports psychologists or even just peer-to-peer support group like ourselves to be able to talk.
Yeah, because I think that's been there's been a lot of bad stuff over recent years, and we'll talk about that maybe shortly. But I think the one positive aspect is that there is a far, far greater awareness now of the point and the relevance of being able to talk about stuff with people just to try and help you through the problems. And as you've suggested, the stigma in asking for help, basically, or just asking for a conversation has been taken away. And professional footballers recognise that, because they're much maligned professional footballers, but it's an incredibly difficult career that they're embarked upon, and it involves people shouting abuse at them sort of every Saturday afternoon, potentially for an hour and a half, for 2 hours. And nowadays it not only involves that sort of live interaction, but when they go home, it follows them there as well, because it's in the phones, it's the social media aspect to it as well. So they see and feel and hear this stuff all the time, and yet they have to come out and perform at their best. So put yourself in the situation of standing at whatever your job is and someone standing over your shoulder and shouting abuse and telling you how rubbish you were for the entire duration of your shift. There is a pressure on them, so it's no wonder that they sometimes exhibit that vulnerability, and the chance they've now got an environment in which it's okay to do that. And so as role models, they can show that, and then other people can hopefully benefit from that as well. And that's where your work, I'm sure, comes in as well.
Well, just to touch on that, how I know that obviously myself and you have had conversations before in regard to Andy's Man Club. How aware before things like the sort of T-shirts at Leeds United and things like that, how aware of Andy's Man Club were you?
Well, I picked up on it, I think, probably through social media. Andrew, because that's where I get most of my information these days. And I'm probably no different from anybody else on that basis. So whatever the social media campaign was that you kicked off with, you know, it had the impact from the beginning there, because I'm interested in it. And I know at some point I'm sure we'll talk about Gary Speed. I have an interest in this because of what I've experienced in recent years. And because also Gary Speed isn't the only person I know who's taken his own life. I now know 3 fathers in my kind of social circle who've lost sons. And at the point where where you suddenly think, that's a ridiculous statistic. How can I know 3 fathers who've all seen their sons take their own lives? How does that happen? That's ridiculous. This has to be a massive, massive issue. If even I know 3 people directly, and every time you have the conversation, somebody else will say, "Oh yeah, well, my uncle, da da da." You know, everybody. It's like an awful spider's web. Everybody seems to know somebody. So it's a huge, huge problem. And we're talking about global pandemic at the moment, which is taking loads of lives. But this thing, quietly fizzing away in the background, is doing something equally terrible. You know, men in particular are taking their own lives in ridiculously high numbers. And yet there doesn't seem to be a massive amount, to me, scrutiny as to asking, why is this and what can we do to make it better?
Definitely. Obviously, you've touched there on Gary Speed, and I think, you know, that's a massive, massive point. You know, we've already spoken about my sort of history as a Leeds fan, and I remember I could tell you exactly where I was the day the news broke around Gary Speed obviously passing, and the fact that then came out that it was something that he'd done himself was an even bigger shock. And you know, it's a story we hear 100 times, isn't it? It was somebody who appeared externally to have the world at his feet. You know, he'd just got into a job that was, you know, he was doing exceptionally well at. It was his dream job. He you know, appeared to have this, you know, dream job, and he was exceptional at it, you know, with the football and things like that. So yeah, I think if we can talk about Gary Speed a little bit, because I think the sort of story that's there is one that we hear quite often. So if you wouldn't just mind talking a little bit about your relationship with Gary Speed initially, to sort of give us a little bit of background there, if that's okay.
Yeah, no problem, Andrew. When I arrived in Leeds, I think it was 1992 when I arrived in Leeds. So I arrived to work for BBC Radio Leeds in the summer after Leeds United had won the First Division Championship, the final First Division Championship, as was. And obviously Gary Speed had been an integral part of that squad. And I'd moved from North Wales, and Gary also from North Wales. And I'd been to watch loads of Wales games, and Gary played for Wales. So when I was initially sent to occasionally go and do stuff at Leeds United, it wouldn't be commentating them, but maybe to go and do an interview with a player. In fact, I was at Wembley for the Charity Shield. That was my second ever Radio Leeds job. So I would have bumped into Gary in the tunnel there. So I would gravitate towards him because we had that connection, or I thought we did, because we were both from North Wales. He played for Wales, I supported North Wales. So there's a bit of the fanboy thing going on there, maybe. But what I quickly discovered was that he was a really nice guy, and he was very helpful, and he was prepared to have a conversation about Wales and stuff like that. So he would indulge me on that basis. And so we developed a rapport quite early on. He was one of those players I discovered quite quickly who, if Leeds had had a bad day, if they'd lost, I could go and ask Gary for an interview where others would say no, he would say yes. And so that's how things kind of developed. And he gave me his number. I think we had those massive house brick mobiles by then, and he gave me his number, and that was a big deal because contacts are very much your strength in terms of the way you work. And then that just kind of developed over the years, and he went away, left Leeds, so I kind of lost a bit. I knew his dad, I knew Roger, because Roger used to walk past us when we would do the commentaries for Radio Leeds, me and Norman Hunter, my pal who we lost last week. And Roger would always stop for a chat, so I got to know Rog, so I knew Roger, I knew Gary. And then he went off and sort of lost a little bit of contact, but then he came back into my region, signed for Sheffield United. I was with Sky by now. Then he started working on the Wales games with Sky, and we had some great nights out in Cardiff together after we worked on them. And then he got, I helped play a part in him getting the Wales job, a very small part, but I did help play a part in that. And he invited me down to Cardiff to have a meal, to celebrate getting the job and all the rest of it. And that's the sort of thing that Gary would do that others probably wouldn't, to be honest with you. So he recognised my contribution and he wanted to say thanks, and that was great. So then he was doing the Wales job, and it was all fantastic. And then I'd taken my children on a Sunday morning, Sunday off, done the Leeds game the day before. Text message had pinged up on my phone during the game on Soccer Saturday that said, I see the first snow in West Yorkshire has just fallen, which was Gary's perennial joke whenever he saw me on TV, because we were the same age. And my Barnet had obviously gone this colour, and his Barnet, world's most handsome man, hadn't. And so the text message pinged up, and it was like, oh, Gary Speed, okay, good one, Gaz. And replied to him, told him there was a Wales player playing for Barnsley on that particular afternoon. He didn't reply, but it was also normal. Next day, took the kids out for a morning out in Leeds, got back to the car, left my phone in the car, a raft of messages on my phone. Then my wife rang me to say, Sky, I've been trying to get hold of you at home, which was very, very unusual, because they never rang me at home. And then, so I rang them back, and they said, oh, yeah, we've had a report that Gary Speed's dead. So I immediately said, well, that's got to be rubbish. In fact, the word I used was bollocks. That's got to be bollocks. And they said, well, it's a good source, and can you put some calls in? And I was kind of reeling from this. So then they came back to me again and said, oh, yeah, apparently he's killed himself. And at that point, I thought, well, this is truly ridiculous now, because it was a daft enough story to start with, but this cannot have happened, because for all the reasons you mentioned, Andrew, this guy, you know, blah, 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 yesterday, text message, all the rest of it, life very looking and okay. And then, of course, I rang somebody from the Welsh FA, somebody that I knew, and he said, yeah, it's true. And that was the point at which I just kind of reeled from that one. And the rest of the day was spent in it. I was a real mess for the rest of the day. And then the next day I went to work, obviously, which in hindsight may not have been the best decision. But I went to work to cover, because I wanted to cover the story in the right way, if you like. Because not only did I know Gary, but I knew people in his family as well by now. So that's the story in a nutshell, if you like.
Well, it's like you say as well, it came out of the blue, and obviously through the work that I do, obviously Andy's Man Club was set up by Luke and Elaine, Andy's brother-in-law and his mum, and speaking to them, they said that there was no sign, signal or warning or anything in regard to obviously Andy taking the same steps. I remember having watched Gary Speed and Gary McAllister on Football Focus the day before. Everything appeared to be, you know, as normal as it could be. And, you know, it's just an absolute shocking statistic, as you say. Obviously, there you touched on the fact that you are aware of other families as well that have been affected in such a way. And it's devastating, you know. Obviously, the more conversations we can have about this, the more normal we can make the fact that men do need to talk about what's going on inside. Obviously, the better we'll hopefully make it.
Well, absolutely. Sorry, Neil, carry on.
I'm just going to say, I think a sign of how well loved Gary Speed was in the world of football, not just at the teams that he played for, is that obviously I'm a Huddersfield fan. I've been 40 years. I used to run a Sunday football team, and I had quite a few Leeds fans playing for me. And actually, I spoke to a couple the other day, mentioned that we're going to be doing this podcast with yourself, and obviously we're bound to end up talking about Gary Speed. And it's one of those, you remember where you were when the Twin Towers came down? Remember where you were when Princess Diana died? Everyone remembers where they were when Gary Speed died. And I think that's a sign of, I mean, I was stood on a touchline on a Sunday football pitch, knowing that I've got these lads, I got a text message through, Gary Speed's dead. And it's one of those that gives you that horrible sinking feeling. And you don't get that with everybody famous that dies, just with certain people. And my lads came off at half time. I didn't tell them because I knew that they'd be upset about it, to be honest. And then we had the conversation at the end of the game. And, you know, a couple of those remember to this day. We all remember where we were when we heard the news. And it's, I think that's a sign of the man.
I think it goes to show as well, though, that we always say, don't we, that these sort of issues can affect any man at any point. And if they
That's a key point. It's a key point, Andrew, is that the shock was because people would go, no way, not Gary Speed. Incredibly low, fantastically successful career, wife, 2 great lads at school, doing well, lovely house, etc., etc. It can't possibly be right. But if you want evidence that this can afflict anybody, then Gary is that evidence.
Yeah,
definitely. And, you know, we've always said as well, haven't we, that the true measure of somebody like Gary Speed was, you know, the fact that we've just had a Huddersfield Town fan who were quite vocal in the fact of their dislike for Leeds United, you know, he was universally liked throughout the world as well, wasn't he? You know, you've touched on the fact that he was willing to talk to anybody. I mean, Liverpool fans didn't dislike him when he played for Everton. Sunderland fans didn't dislike him when he played for Newcastle. Man United fans didn't dislike him when he played for Leeds. You know, and somebody who was universally liked, as we just said, it can affect absolutely anybody. And hopefully the thing to take off the discussion that we've just had is obviously that it's okay to talk no matter who you are, what circumstance you're in. Just talk about what's going on inside so that obviously you feel better.
Yeah, because Gary proved that he was an incredible actor, I think, in all of this. I mean, that would be what you would draw from it. You know, he was living a very normal life, less than, 24 hours before all this happened. Normal to the extent of, I do Soccer Saturday, I get the text message he always sends me when he sees me doing something on the telly. So his mind was thinking along completely normal lines at that point, or so it would appear outwardly to anybody like me on receipt of the text message. But actually, clearly there was something that was very, very close to bubbling up to the surface there that was completely at odds with anything that anybody would ever have expected of him.
Yeah. The one word you've used there, Bryn, that sort of resonates is the word actor. And we use that a lot at Andy's Man Club, in that when you go to any Andy's Man Club around the country on a Monday night, you're probably surrounded by a group of guys who at some point have been some of this country's best actors.
Yeah.
Because they put such a front on them. Done it myself. Andy's done it himself. You put such a front on and such a facade that the people on the outside haven't got a clue that anything's anything other than normal. And obviously, there's somebody like Gary Speed, probably even harder. The fact that he's under such a microscope, massive job, you know, managing his country, famous, got everything going for him in the scheme of things. And that probably makes it harder for people like Gary Speed to actually come out and admit that there's something just not quite right. And
well, I have some insight into this because I have certainly had a public profile, and it does change because you do act in a way that is, you know, you're aware of the profile that you carry. So sometimes you go out and sometimes people recognize you, and that means that you have to sort of act in a different way. And they expect, because of the thing that you do, in particular if you're involved with football, people will expect, probably rightly so, that you've got kind of the greatest job in the world and you're the luckiest person going. But within every job, everybody has the same type of anxieties and worries and pressures, and, you know, bullying occurs in every type of workplace, not just in normal workplaces, if you like. So there are aspects to everything, even in jobs like football or broadcasting or whatever it might be. All the normal things exist there, and while you're in the midst of it, you suffer them. When you present yourself publicly, you're kind of meant to not mention them, if you like, because you've got this, you're really lucky, you've got this thing going on. So it does make it, I mean, that's where I think footballers definitely do need, not just footballers, or anybody who has this profile nowadays, because the extra pressures that come from people being able to comment on you, you know, constantly, they do need a bit of extra support, probably, because the world's changed a lot, but you still have to keep going forward as if everything's great. You know, I've found it difficult. The last 12 months have been really difficult for me, because I'm thinking about all those things that are in between matches or whatever it is I'm doing. I'm thinking about mortgages and you know, I'm earning a third of what I was earning previously, and those sorts. It's just the normal stuff that can build up and build up and build up, and that's the release bit, I guess, that you guys would provide.
Well, I think that's a really good cue to come into how we normally conduct the rest of our podcasts now, isn't it? That, you know, with everyone we've done so far, we've then gone in to conduct a little mini Andy's Man Club session. So I think that's a really good point to come into it there, Bryn, if you're happy to join us and join in with an AMC.
Go on then.
Brilliant. So as we always do with how's your week been? My week personally has been hugely positive. I've spent an awful lot of time outside in the garden with my little boy, kicking footballs around and, you know, watching films and spending time with family, which is time that would normally be spent out of the house at work or, you know, doing things socially and things like that. You know, the positive to take out of that is the fact that I'm at home and there's people here who I enjoy spending my time with. So my week on the whole has been hugely positive. Last night we had our online Andy's Man Club, and I facilitated the session for new guys who'd never attended an Andy's Man Club before. That was an amazing positive. the support that was shown between a group of 12, 13 fellas who'd never met each other before, but all talking in an open and supportive way, and the support that was shown to each other was staggering. So obviously, even though we're in trying times, I've had a really positive week. What about yourself, Neil? How's your week been?
On the whole, I'd say I've had a really good week. Obviously, been getting involved in 2 or 3 podcasts. I'll mention one on my positive for the week. I've been doing other ones that I do for Huddersfield Town. So I'll get that bit in balance. The Leeds United Huddersfield Town bit out on this podcast. It's been a bit one-sided so far.
Bit like that.
Yeah, that one one-sided. That was 2.5-sided. To be fair, you ruined us. Yeah, I've had a pretty good week also. Pretty good week.
Fantastic. What about yourself, Bryn? How's your week been?
I'm not even sure I know what day it is. So in terms of analysing the week,
True story.
I know Bin Day was last Thursday, but that's how kind of getting things at the moment. Because it's. I wish I could be quite as positive as you lads, but I wouldn't be really, because it's just the uncertainty at the moment is kind of, it's an ever-present, is there at the back of your mind kind of constantly. So what I'm doing is trying to throw myself into other things. So I've got, doing this is great because it's a chance to focus on something and talk and all the rest of it. Yeah. And I've got other projects going because I'm building a YouTube channel with some media communications guidance from things I've picked up over the years, and the coaching courses that I do. Coaching courses to prepare for, which has been really good. Actually, 2 things that have happened in the last few days that are good are people contacting me to ask me to do things in the future. So I've had 2 coach education courses that I've had to put together, which I'll be doing next month online. And then I've had I had a university, I've been doing some lecturing as well. A university got in touch to say that they'd be in touch closer to the start of the new year, whenever that's going to be. And just those 2 little things are real positives, because that throws forward to something different that goes beyond where we're stuck at the moment, where we're all stuck at the moment. And that's been helpful because I need to be able to see beyond where we're stuck at the moment from a personal point of view.
Fantastic. I think it's really important. Difficult and trying situation, but to be able to find positives is massive. So thank you for that. Are you done with your draws there, Nick?
I'm just a cat trying to get in and out. Can't make it quick mind.
Well, I had my little boy jump in before. I don't know if you noticed it, but he did.
You need to look at my tutorial on the YouTube channel about where you should set up to do your podcast stroke interviews.
I'll take
right in front of a door.
On the window, and if the window is just shining light straight through, and you can't see me. So I've had to turn it round so that you've got the vision of Ellen Road and my lead shirt behind. Question number 2 then. What's one positive from your week? Positive from my week was the news that we had AMC-wise a few days ago. Luke's talked about it on the last couple of podcasts that we've had, that one of our facilitators north of the border, Scott, was in ICU battling against the coronavirus. He's actually come out of ICU over the last few days, and that's a massive positive. Obviously, it's a difficult situation. I know that obviously it's something that's affected yourself this week, Bryn, as well. Obviously, I
wish I should have mentioned, because that's if anything doesn't make this a positive week, then the loss of Norman Hunter is very much that thing. So, and that's the first time for me that this. I've been in isolation, as it were, a lockdown rather, for weeks like everybody else. So I'm seeing my family, and that's about it, to be honest with you. But it hasn't impinged on my life directly up until a point where Norman was reported that he was suffering from it, and all of a sudden it came into stark focus then. And to lose Norman in those circumstances, somebody who's very special to me, was that's really brought it into focus, I think. And what makes it even worse is, again, I know Norman's wife and his kids and all the rest. I know the family, and he won't be afforded and accorded the send off that a person of his incredible stature absolutely deserves, and that does make me very sad, I'll be honest with you.
Yeah, definitely. I sympathise with you on that. Obviously, somebody who I've met a number of times through being a supporter, and listened to yourself and him on the radio as well growing up as well. So it's a devastating set of circumstances there. But like I say, just to sort of touch back on the positive, the news that we get. No, absolutely fine. We're here to talk about those circumstances. I'm happy to allow you to do that, Bryn. But just to sort of bring it back around to the question, obviously the positive for me is that the news that we had, that one of our guys is looking like he's on the mend, so that's a massive positive. One positive from your week, Neil.
Other than doing these podcasts, I've actually done one, the one that we do for Huddersfield Town fans, and we had Bryn Law, the name of it. We had Ian Dunn on with us for a couple of hours the other night, and he was just what you'd expect of somebody who was a steady away footballer in the sort of lower leagues, really down to earth, really nice bloke, sort of put everything into perspective. Well, I just sat talking to one of your mates for a couple of hours, but one of your mates who you've seen help your club win at Wembley, a playoff final and stuff like that. So it was, even at my age, you still get a buzz out of talking to people like that. So that's mine. Brilliant.
Fantastic. Neil, Bryn, one positive from your week?
Well, I enjoyed my Saturday night because I logged into, they were doing a Manchester DJ set all Saturday evening, and I logged into that from about 8 o'clock, and I was still with it when it shut down at midnight. And after the bad Friday, very, very upsetting news on Friday, to actually have the opportunity just to be a little bit daft, even in the confines of my own back room, was quite a good outlet. That, let's put it that way. Enjoyed that.
Love that.
Fantastic. Question number 3 then every single week in Andy's Man Club is there anything you need to get off your chest? I'm in the fortunate position at this moment in time. Like I said, I had an AMC last night to get things off my chest and things like that. So I'm in the positive circumstance at this moment in time. I don't need to get anything off my chest. So we'll pass on to you, Neil.
Nothing in particular. The only thing that continues to grind my gears, if you like, is all these idiots who still flout the very basic idea of lockdown. You know, stop messing about, and we'll see the numbers of people dying dramatically drop, and that's by one hope that people sort of eventually register. But other than that, I've no else to say.
Cheers, Neil. Anything from yourself, Bryn?
Well, how long have you got? But I'll go with this one for now, and that is, as I've already stressed, football's just a game, and in the great scheme of things, is relatively unimportant. But all these people who seem to jump is the wrong word, who seem to be desperate to say you can't play football again, you actually, those of us who enjoy it, those of us even more so who work in it, do need a sense of being still having the opportunity in future to be involved, to watch, to interact, whatever it is, with the thing that we enjoy as a passion. And so don't come at us and suggest that it's the least important thing ever, because, well, from my perspective, there is actually a mortgage involved as well. So if I do talk about life beyond where we are currently, and do try and plan ahead on the basis that I'll be involved with football again, kind of forgive me for that, please.
More than forgiven from our perspective. You're talking to two people, I think, who sit on the same fence as yourself, that, our hope is that, we get there too. So obviously for quite different reasons, but, I think we're all looking for the same outcome, really. Question number 4 then, just for those of you that are aware, question 1, 2 and 3, every single week they're the same. Question 4 and 5 change, and some weeks they'd be about, things that make you laugh. Sometimes they're about setting focus or setting targets or, things like that. And question number 4 last night was, if you were going on a road trip, which 3 people would you take with you and why? I'm going to continue with a theme that we've had through the podcast, which has been quite primarily football. The first person that would be jumping in the car with me would be a gentleman called Gordon Strachan. A hero of mine, obviously the last man to lift the First Division title at Ellen Road. But on top of that, a proper character as well. When he was a manager and one thing and another, he told a tale, didn't he, about, somebody asked him in a post-match interview, what area do you think you were outclassed last night? And he turned around and went, that big green one out there. And just his quips and his one-liners, he's quite an entertaining fella in that sense. I wouldn't be able to go on a road trip and sort of football-wise and not take Marcelo Bielsa with me. I'd like to tap into his footballing knowledge and just find out what it is that he's done to that set of players that's made them perform in the ways that they have. I'm not going to take his interpreter with me because I theory.
You're not going to have much of a conversation then, Andrew. But anyway, carry on.
I have a theory that he speaks English an awful lot better than he lets on to the press. And I would also take, you mentioned Manchester music there as well, Bryn. It's something that I've got a personal passion for as well. And I spend quite a lot of time playing the guitar to entertain myself. So I would take a gentleman called John Squire, who was the guitarist, or still is. Well, they've never officially broken up again, I suppose. But the guitarist from the Stone Roses. It's a band that I find myself playing quite a lot on the guitar, and it's those are the three people I'd take with myself. Obviously, while myself and John are in the back talking about music, Gordon and Marcelo could be in the front, and we'll all sort of mix around. So I think that'd be a nice mix of people. Neil?
Yeah, mine's sort of slightly closer to home. Just one quick one on the Gordon Strachan thing. The funniest one I ever heard him say was the reporter said, "Can you have a quick word?" He said velocity and walked off. Brilliant. One of the funniest things I've ever seen live on television. Absolutely brilliant. Well, that were Gordon Strachan, wasn't it?
Yeah.
What he does. My three, a bit closer to home, obviously missing the football. And if I were on a road trip, I'd have my two best mates, Ben and Danny, and my dad, because that would mean I'd be going to an away game somewhere. And that makes me very, very happy. Don't matter about the 90 minutes in between, that's sort of peripheral to the day out. It's all about the day with the people that you want to be with. So, yeah, they'd be my three.
Fantastic. Bryn?
That's a great point, to be fair, because actually you can say famous people, but sometimes famous people are not quite what you hope they're going to be.
No.
I've had my run-ins with Gordon Strachan down the years in terms of those quip interviews that you just mentioned there, where he thinks, "Ha, yeah, that was funny," and you're standing there thinking, "I can't believe you just done that to me." That's by the by. So, but I'll go down the celebrity route, because I do love an away trip with my mates. There is no better sensation. Or I could say taking my family on holiday, which in itself at the moment looks as far away as anything. I'm as likely to go with Robert De Niro, who I'll name as number one, as I am to go away on holiday with the family at the moment. So Robert De Niro, because fantastic career, and you just want to know kind of what's going on inside that head and all the rest of it. And Goodfellas, I love that film. I'd want to talk about that. So that would be one, again, because he's somebody I've met some of the people that I want to meet, and sometimes for better or for worse. But that's so I've kind of had that privilege through the career. Kevin Rowland, who was the lead singer of Dexys Midnight Runners,
Dexys, yeah.
And then Dexys, more recently Dexys, who's fascinated me my entire life, and I would love to talk. He does very little. He appears in public very little. So the opportunity to talk to him about his career, where he came from, and all the rest of it would be fascinating to me, I hope. And the third one, who the heck would the third one be? That's a. I'll tell you what I'll say Norman, because if Norman was on the road trip, Norman Hunter would still be with us. So let's go with that.
Fantastic. Thanks for that, Bryn.
Good one.
So which three items would you take with you on the road trip? I'd have to take a guitar, because I've got John Squire with me, and I'd have to take a football, because I've got Gordon Strachan and Marcelo Bielsa. And other than that, it would probably be my phone, so that I can document some of the things that have been going on with that. So those would be the three items that I'd take with me. Neil?
Well, because it's an away day, there'll be no beer involved, actually, because I'll be driving. So you're not drinking if I can't. I'd take my favourite thing for an away day, as you well know, be a double-decker. Got to have a double-decker because it's the best chocolate bar on the planet. Copious amounts of crisps, and obviously the match tickets. And I think on the way home, we might wish we'd forgot the match tickets.
Well, me and you did a sort of Andy's Man Club away day last year, didn't we? We drove up to Hartlepool to go and visit our Hartlepool.
Yeah.
And again, all of those things, bar the match tickets, were in the car. You'd furnished us crisps and double deckers on that day as well. So I confirm that.
Got to be done.
Can I just ask, Neil, do you do healthy lifestyle choices as part of the Andy's Man Club discussions?
Healthy. It's a healthy. AMC is all about health for the mind.
Okay. Good answer.
Well, very much each to their own as well, Bryn. There'll be somebody that'll say they would take a treadmill and their gym pass, and
absolutely, yeah. I'm just all for a good day out, because I think we all need one of those at the minute.
I'm not judging you, Neil.
It's no problem at all. I'm happy to be done.
Because if I'm on a way down, I'm definitely taking beer, by the way. But What would I take with me? Well, this thing that I'm talking to you on now, the iPad, has become like a fundamental part of my life, ridiculously so. The phone as well, but I found myself doing so much work on this over the last few weeks. This is my link now. This small thing I'm looking into is my link with the outside world effectively at the moment. It's my tool of business. So it literally does go everywhere with me. So, and it gives you the opportunity to document trips, as you mentioned. And I've written a couple of books, and quite large sections of the books were written on the iPad kind of thing, because it's always there with you. So that does give you that access to the outside world and does give you that opportunity to do lots of different things. So I'd have that. The other two, well, I'm putting beer in, whatever. Listen, I don't even know where I'm going, but I'll put it in there.
Don't matter, does it?
Doesn't really. No.
The destination don't matter. It's all about the journey and the people you're with.
Absolutely. And I'll put a change of pants on as well, please, because if we're going to be away for more than a day, then I'm going to need clean underpants.
Man, that through. I like that. Brilliant. So yeah, that's sort of how an AMC works. That the last two questions can be a little bit of something to lift the mood, or whatever it might be. So thank you for partaking in that, Bryn. The last one that we always bring in as well, it's something of a tradition in our podcast as well, is the last thing that made you laugh out loud. For myself, obviously, I spoke on, I think it was the first question about the time I spent with the family and watching films. We watched Night at the Museum with my 6-year-old boy a few days ago. And ever since, he keeps walking around the house going, "Dum Dum, you give me gum gum." From the Easter Island statue that sits in the corridor of the museum. But he's got it absolutely down. He's nailed it. And, he drops it at some fantastic moments. And it's making me laugh almost on a daily occurrence at the moment. So that was my little boy's impression of the Easter Island statue out of Night at the Museum. Neil?
This is one of those where you have to be there. My wife tried to do an impression of the actor John Lithgow saying hello. I've never heard out quite as ridiculous in my life, and absolutely howling. But yeah, you definitely had to be there. I'm not going to give you a rendition of it, but it was brilliant.
You're not going to try it yourself, Neil?
You're going to met me, aren't you?
Yeah.
It's just hello, John Lithgow. That
I'm going more Roger Moore, to be honest.
Well, yeah, it's just one of those. But we should try to do it, and it would just. We keep doing it now, and it's one of those that's going to. You have to be there. It's an in joke, but you look for a laugh any way you can at the moment, don't you?
Definitely. Anything from yourself, Bryn?
Well, yeah. I'll go with the character that Bob Mortimer's created that he's put on social media, guy which he called the Rain Guy. And I'm actually now, particularly at the moment, I'm absolutely desperate for another one of those to appear, because he's created something fantastic. They're only 60 seconds long, each little section of them. If you haven't seen it and you've got access to Twitter, highly recommend you have a look at it, because every time I see them, I laugh. So I would say have a little look at Train Guy and have a camper choo-choo on me.
Into my inbox every single time we release. Myself and my brothers have got a group chat, and it just goes in there. And they are hilarious. Yeah, brilliant. Right, fantastic. So that sort of signals the end of the Andy's Man Club podcast again for another again deep and meaningful sort of podcast. So thank you so much to yourself, Bryn, for coming on, talking so candidly, joining in with an AMC. I understand obviously last week was a tough week for you, and the subject matter that we've discussed today as well has obviously been a tough discussion point for you as well. So I thank you for coming on and joining us.
Pleasure. Keep up the good work, fellas.
Thank you.
No, thanks for joining us. Really appreciate it, Bryn. Thank you. Pleasure.
And we always sign off. You mentioned with our campaign that Luke started a few years ago. So if I could ask everybody to say, it's okay to talk.
It's okay to talk.
It's okay to talk.
Fantastic, thank you.
Dark feelings are back, assaulting your heart with a panic attack. There ain't no shame in feeling depressed. You need to sit down and talk, son. Get it off your chest. It's just another bad day. Dark feelings are back, assaulting your heart with a panic attack. There ain't no shame in feeling depressed. You need to sit down and talk, son.